Welcome to Yoga and Podcast. I am your host, Ashley Weber, a yoga and embodiment teacher who is living and learning every day in the wonderful Austin, Texas. And I am just so curious about all things yoga and. Today we will explore the subject of yoga and minimalism, and I'm especially excited to interview certified yoga teacher, minimalist lifestyle coach, and business owner, Dara Zycherman. Before this interview, I knew very minimal about minimalism, and I watched Dara's TED Talk. That's what inspired me having her on the show, her TED Talk about the subject, minimalism. And I realized just how much I like minimalism and how in alignment I already am with the concept. And it blew my mind. And it's actually a very open-ended concept, which we talk a lot about in this episode. So if you are a seasoned minimalist or you're just learning about minimalism, there's something in this episode for absolutely everyone. Dara will discuss all about why minimalism is so important, including environmental aspects, how it is related to yoga, specifically through the Yamas and the Niyamas. I know you're going to love this episode just as much as I did, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode, y'all. Joining us on today's episode is minimalist lifestyle coach and business owner of Less Equals More, Dara Zycherman. Hey, Dara, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing so well, and I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be on the show.
I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah. So would you like to introduce yourself a little bit more? Tell me who you are and what you're about.
Sure. I'm sure I could do that in 30 seconds or less. My name is Dara, as you mentioned, and I own a local Austin-based business called Less Equals More. So I'm a minimalist lifestyle coach and professional organizer. I educate on the subject. I do talks about it. I do talk a lot in my work about mindfulness. And that is my quote unquote job, but really it's my lifestyle. When I left my full-time job 5.5 years ago, I really wanted to have my life, my work, all my hobbies, everything be sort of woven into one. So I try to be a walking billboard for a minimalist lifestyle. So that's sort of what I'm all about, is just doing whatever I feel like doing it and finding a way to make that sustainable, both in terms of being sustainable so I can keep doing it, and also sustainable in terms of the environment.
I love that. That is a great way to live your life. And I love how you mentioned you're going the walking billboard of what you represent. That's great. Mm-hmm. So I imagine you weren't always a minimalist. What might have drawn you to minimalism exactly? And then how has it affected your life?
Mm-hmm. In some ways, I like to reimagine my childhood as me being a minimalist, but I know that wasn't quite the case. I was more of an organized person from the very beginning. And so I had that sense of organization. I had that sense of understanding that if I owned something, I was placing an importance on it and being very aware of it. But even in my adolescence and growing up, a few main things really solidified with me. One was that I love efficiency. I hate spending time doing things I don't want to do. And at a young age, I realized, well, then if you just are really efficient about everything, then you could have more time doing what you want to do. I'm definitely somebody who likes a lot of unstructured time. So I use structure to accelerate how quickly I could get to my unstructured time. I was also very frugal growing up. My parents definitely instilled that value into me, but even they used to call me a miser when I was young, because I would the only thing I ever hoarded was money in my little cash box from random allowance here and there and jobs that I had. So frugalness was important. And then by the time this happened in high school, but definitely by the time I was an environmental science major in college, sustainability was the framing in which I saw the world. So I went from being someone who was very aware of stuff, very organized. I always felt like the house I grew up in was too big. It wasn't huge, but it always bothered me that I lived in the suburbs and it felt very unnecessary and inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of those pieces kind of came together that by the time I was out of school and starting my own adult life, I essentially was a minimalist, although that term wasn't quite popular then. Voluntary simplicity was a term coined by Dwayne Elgin, I believe his name is. He wrote a book called Voluntary Simplicity. And I started to see that being an environmentalist didn't mean you had to eschew all technology and all the like modern efficiencies in the world, but that you can make choices specific to your life and what your life goals were to ensure simplicity, that you didn't have to make a absolute choice one way or the other and be, like Thoreau living at Walden Pond, you could really design your life the way that you wanted to. So that's sort of how I came to it. So again, in my mind, I was always sort of a minimalist, but it was more like I had the pieces that were inevitably going to bring me to this point.
I love it. You sound like a little adult when you were a kid describing yourself, like the being frugal, being organized.
Well, and in a meta sort of way, I took that idea of efficiency and like front loading in all aspects of life, whether when I was working at a full-time job and project managing, whether it was my own life we're talking about here, that sort of efficiency of like getting the work done first and in the quickest way possible so you can actually have fun. So when I was young, I was in some ways more of an adult than I am now. Now I get to play a lot more, but it's because I invested all of that time earlier on making responsible decisions that I get to enjoy the fruits of it.
That's so cool. I wish I would have known you as a kid. We could have been like little, like
we'd have had a lot of fun. Definitely.
And I love what you're saying about the unstructured time. I too crave unstructured time, and I don't like to do anything that I don't want to do if there's no reason behind it. So I really resonate with what you're saying. So could you elaborate a little bit more on what exactly the word minimalism means? Definition, perhaps.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because I love minimalism because it's not this dogma. It's not this specific way of living. And there's no like true definition. Minimalism was born out of the design industry. Minimalism is a type of style. And so that's where it came from. And it was adopted in terms of lifestyle, but it gives us an opportunity to sort of define it for ourselves. And that's actually the first part of my definition of minimalism, is that it's specific to a person. It's not about how big your house is. It's not how many items of clothing you have or items of anything. Minimalism is what for you allows you to live your fullest, most free life with the absolute least amount of stuff and obligations. Now, finding that perfect balance, of course, is something, one will spend a lifetime trying to achieve, but that's the point of it. So minimalism, going back to what I said before, is about efficiency. It's doing the most with the least. It's something that can be applied through the lens of your financial situation. It can be applied through the lens of the physical objects you have, but really it's through all aspects of your life, your to-do list, your calendar, how to make everything simple. And I often try to really clarify the difference between being organized and simple, because sometimes minimalism and organized get way too connected. Organized means that things are in an order, things are in a place. But you could have a tremendous amount of stuff and it be organized. You can also organize something in a way that looks organized and feels organized by some metric, even like color coding things, right? Like if you have things organized by color, that's organized, but it's not necessarily simple if you're trying to find something that you don't look for, with color being the sort of orienter. So minimalism for me really has a lot to do with those sort of more functional pieces, but inwardly, it's about awareness. It's about mindfulness. It's about really understanding who you are and being truly, truly honest with yourself. So I often liken minimalism to honesty, because if you really were going that deep and that honest with yourself, most people's lives would look different.
And I imagine, I love how you distinguish between organization and minimalism, but the simplicity part and the efficiency part, you're correlating to parts of minimalism. I imagine the peacefulness that comes from that. Organized doesn't necessarily mean peaceful, whereas I think minimalism, you're saying it's what the definition is for you. You're really looking inward. It sounds like it leads to peace.
I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's the selling point. I love the nuts and bolts and the how-tos and the figuring out, but in the end, it exactly what you said, it all brings you toward a certain peacefulness, a contentedness in your own life. And it is one of the huge benefits is just not being as stressed out.
Well, and I love you did a TED Talk, and I watched it, and I was blown away, because honestly, until this conversation today and our conversation last week, I hadn't known much about minimalism. It was just this mysterious concept to me. And getting to know you and watching your TED Talk really helped me to understand that, oh, this is in alignment with my values. Whereas before, it was just this mysterious thing that I only heard about a few years ago.
I wanted to reinforce something you said about how it aligned with your values and how it was sort of a mystery to you, what this whole minimalism thing is. And so I really appreciate that, because there is that sort of black box of what minimalism is, and the sort of harsh lines that sometimes can get drawn, not by everybody, but that you found that connection to a deeper part of yourself and how it aligned with your values. And I think that there are a lot of other people like you that might be new to minimalism that will find that it resonates with them in much the same way.
Welcome to the Spotlight Corner. This segment highlights Black, Indigenous, people of color, and or LGBTQ+ individuals, community, businesses, and organizations, specifically in those areas. And in no way is this a paid advertisement or a sponsorship. It's simply people who I think are awesome and would like to show my support and hope to inspire you in supporting them as well. Lately, I've been taking virtual dance classes. Workout with Erica Nix. Oh my God. Cardio, aerobics, dancing. I have been somewhat resistant and self-conscious always about dancing. But Erica makes this so fun that the time truly flies when I take her classes. You learn a little bit of every dance move. You learn how to protest cheerlead. She teaches you how to rave. You learn how to dance to the song called Bubble Butt. Personally, these classes have been so good for me. I sweat, I get my heart rate up. Erica is such a knowledgeable teacher, great instruction. She's also really fun and doesn't take herself too seriously, which I think is a really awesome bonus. Dancing is so out of my comfort zone, but I'm in the comfort of my own home with these virtual classes, so learning how to dance has not been nearly as intimidating as going to a studio and trying to find my rhythm. Also, if you've been feeling disconnected from your LGBTQ+ community like I have, it's a great way to stay connected to like-minded people. I also would like to give props to Erica because she has been teaching these classes in the community for years in Austin. She holds a safe and fun space for people who may not always feel comfortable or even welcome in a traditional workout environment. If you would like to check out Workout with Erica Nix, I'll put her info in the show notes. She has a Patreon, patreon.com/workout with Erica Nix. It's very affordable, quite the steal, actually. And I hope you feel inspired in supporting what Erica is doing. And I know you will have so much fun working out with her. And to be honest, we need as much lighthearted activities as we can get these days. So I hope to see you in class soon. So exactly how did you start your business, Less Equals More?
Well, back to the walking billboard description I gave you. I worked for 12 years at an environmental nonprofit organization, and I loved my job. I mean, I've always been very much aligned with my career. And I had one of those little fortune cookie slips that had the Mahatma Gandhi quote about being the change you wish to see in the world. And as I was sort of contemplating my departure from that organization, I realized that my desire to have my own business, to have the sort of freedom, to go from an organization that was a lot about scale, which was wonderful. We could reach a lot of people. I wanted to kind of do the opposite because I hadn't been in a one-on-one space in a long time. And I had this sort of like epiphany that, oh, wait, I can, by being who I am, I've already helped people with these types of tasks throughout my life. And I also did it kind of as a side hustle for a bit while working there. So it was this like incredible culmination of all the things that I wanted to do. And I actually decided to leave my job.
Wow.
I had left a long-term relationship, sold my house, and I decided to take a year off because I had saved a lot of money. See my previous comment about being a miser, saved some money, and was like, I want to travel. I want to see different things. I want to do different things. I want to experience freedom. And I want to start this business, Less Equals More. And I promised myself that at the end of the year, I would reevaluate what I wanted to do. I could go back into the environmental nonprofit sector. I could do something else. And by the end of the year, it was like, oh man, I will never give this up, because it really did do for me, not only what I was hoping it would, but so much more. Because by that point, I'd experienced all of these incredible interactions with my clients that underscored the need for this type of work and showed me that I could really build from that a lot of education and hopefully insight to help more people at a broader scale.
Who would have thought a fortune cookie?
I know. Well, my family, we're big Chinese food restaurant folks. Ever since I was a little kid, I remember going with my grandparents, and yes, I have a lot of fond memories. So it came from a surprising yet maybe not so surprising place.
Yeah. Oh, and how courageous for you to just make those huge shifts, mentioning long-term relationship ending, a long-term career, letting go of that, letting go of your house, letting go and just moving forward. And that's really inspiring to hear, because some of us like want to do that, but it's like when you don't know anyone who's took the leap, it's a little harder. So thank you for sharing that.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you.
How do you practice yoga in your own life?
It's a wonderful question. And I'd like to start off by saying or mentioning how I haven't sometimes. That sometimes in my life, I've been feeling like things were a bit full on my schedule. And maybe even if I felt like I had time to go for a run, that would replace the yoga. So I don't ever want to, just as I mentioned, I want to be a walking billboard. I also want to be very clear that even as somebody who's practiced yoga since 2003, I haven't always been entirely consistent. But what I can say is that since that time, I rarely have gone more than a week or two without doing yoga. So I don't go months and months at a time without doing it. It's been consistent, but sometimes very light to the touch, right? But I would say that especially as time passed and I learned more about yoga as a lifestyle, not just a class one goes to, I would say that I'm always practicing some bit of yoga in the form of the Yoga Sutras, and having that mindful awareness in so much of what I do. Which again, I don't have that mindful awareness every second of every day, but it is something that is always present, and it's something I might dip into or out of, which I think is very different than doing something, stopping, forgetting about, feeling guilty about, and then potentially restarting. It's been a through line that's never, disintegrated. But in terms of how yoga is in my life now, I have been practicing about an hour and 15-minute practice every morning. Maybe one morning per week, I might skip it, but I do asana for about 30 to 45 minutes at home, followed by 10 minutes of pranayama, followed by 15 to 20 minutes of meditation, seated silent meditation. But it took me a very long time of doing pieces of that in many different ways to get to that point where it feels very comfortable and natural for me. Had I tried to force that upon myself 10 years ago, for a variety of reasons, I don't think it would have stuck the way that it does now.
I like how you acknowledge the ebb and flow of the yoga itself in your life, how it is consistent, but it ebbs and flows, and how it also, it sounds like it evolves, like starting, I believe you said 2003, probably look very different than what you do right now, how it's taken you time to build that practice of sitting and meditating, physical practice and all that.
Yeah, and it was around, I want to say 2017, it might have been the year before, that I did my yoga teacher training. So I'd been practicing yoga for a very long time before I actually did the yoga teacher training, and that was very transformative for me, because the concepts of yoga as a philosophy really rose to the top. And I would add that aside from this sort of more physical meditative practice, I definitely do a lot of yoga learning throughout, maybe not every day, but throughout the course of a month, I'll do some sort of learning.
Very cool. Well, that gets me into the next question that I'm really curious about. How is minimalism related to the yamas and the niyamas?
So I was reflecting upon this before our conversation, and it's funny because it really relates to all of them. So I'm just going to mention a few highlights, a few really obvious places where they interconnect. But I think it's a really wonderful area of study that I like to educate others about as well, because it's just so fascinating to me that we have all of the answers, and we have for so long, and we've just kind of gotten a little bit lost along the way. So with the yamas, satya, truthfulness, goes back to an earlier point I made about how minimalism is honesty. So if you're really, and let's get into like a nitty gritty kind of example. If you fashion yourself a guitar player and you haven't touched a guitar in 6 years and you have 3 of them, you might not be being honest with yourself, Or if you have thousands of pictures, you just like pictures, frame pictures, all this stuff that you never look at, and you've just been collecting, probably not being honest with yourself. And if you keep a lot of books on your bookshelf and you have lots of bookshelves with all these books, and you do that because you want people who visit your home to think that you're really smart, you're not being honest with yourself. So there are many ways in which minimalism can unearth dishonesty. Or here's another one that I think happens to folks a lot. People who keep things given to them by others that they really don't like. And maybe it even makes them feel bad, or it makes them feel guilty to give it away. So they're going to accept things into their home with under sort of a false pretense. So Satya really can help us unpack the deeper issues. And once you do that, minimalism gets really easy. It's hard because, you know, you have that work to do. Asteya, which is non-stealing, has a lot to do with sustainability from my perspective, because we don't want to steal from the earth. And the more resources we consume, the more we are taking from the earth rather than giving back. But we could also steal from ourselves. We can steal from others, because stealing in the Yoga Sutras isn't really about like just like going outright and burglarizing someone's home. It's about like taking that which is more than what you need, which brings us to parigraha, which I can never quite pronounce correctly. Maybe you know the pronunciation.
I thought it was beautiful.
Exactly.
That's as
I
good
said it
as
really quickly.
Yeah.
That's the trick. So that's non-possessiveness. And that really highlights that adage, what we possess possesses us. And we become so attached to the things that we have that it becomes a part of our identity. Even if you hear someone say, oh, I'm a collector. I have all these things because I'm a collector. No, you're Bob. You know, you're Bob. And maybe you collect some things. You can stop at any time. It doesn't define your true self. So we get attached to these identities, and then certainly our stuff that represents those identities. So non-possessiveness and a reminder of how insidious that can be, super helpful. Thank you, Yoga Sutras. And then if we were to look at the niyamas, santosha, or contentment, non-seeking. Not everybody. A lot of folks are looking for their next meal. So I'm only talking about folks that can easily feed and clothe themselves and shelter themselves and the people in their home or their family. But once you're at that level, you can find contentment no matter what. I mean, some might say you can find contentment even if you don't have those things, but let's just use that as our baseline. If you have a place to live and food to eat and clothes on your back and a job, you might not be able to buy all of the things and take all the vacations you want. And it doesn't mean you can't have any of those things, but you can find contentment no matter whether you have them or not. And I think that also the play between pleasure and avoidance is really important here, that we're always seeking pleasure, we're always trying to avoid pain. These sort of distractions on either end tend to manifest in us buying more things and doing more things than we actually need to, and that would actually make us happy. And finally, svadhyaya, which is self-study. I mean, that's like the cornerstone here, right? If you really look deep constantly, and because this is a big thing with minimalism, it's not a steady state. Your needs are going to change as you grow, and therefore the things that you have and the things you have on your calendar have to change with you. So self-study is an ongoing process, but looking that deeply inside yourself, wow, you could really figure a lot out before you open up that first bag to put stuff in, right? Like there's a lot of pre-work that goes into minimalism, I think, in terms of making sure that it is true to you rather than the conception of minimalism that you might have bought into. So those are just a few places, but honestly, I think all of the Yoga Sutras have a piece. Oh, and I forgot to mention the non-hoarding one. I meant to write down the Sanskrit word brahmacharya.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, non-hoarding. I mean, that literally speaks to not keeping more for yourself than you actually need. I mean, it's truly fascinating how in-depth a look into what we keep was done even at a time when people didn't have a lot. But that concept of non-hoarding came, thousands of years ago, because for as long as humans have been around, we've had, the ability to keep more than we want to, especially as we became more sedentary in our lifestyles. So we always have to look out for that just because you can hold on to something, and it might seem to you, oh, I might use this one day, or who knows, I might need this or something. You keeping it means somebody else doesn't have it. So if you're not using something, there is an element of hoarding onto things, usually for a sense of security, but it can be for other reasons too, but it's really unnecessary. So yeah, Yoga Sutras are rich with this stuff.
I mean, you're so right. I hadn't thought of it in that context. And also you mentioned if you have something and you're not using it, someone else could be using it and you're hoarding it. There's also this awareness of other people. Like you have to,
yes,
not everybody has that concept. Still, so it's an like you mentioned, the awareness, the mindfulness. I'm curious about I just feel like asking you this. It's not in the notes, but creativity and minimalism. I always find I'm the most creative when I am forced to simplify in my life for maybe finances. I remember like the crash in 2008. I was the most creative because I had to be. And then last year, I also was the most creative I've been in years because I've had to simplify. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I love those examples, and I feel the same way. The simplicity creates conditions for creativity, and you've given some really good examples of like big ones, right? Like those are big moments in time where things could have gone one way or the other. Sometimes I think about creativity and minimalism when I think about folks who have, let's just say, like an overabundance of kitchen utensils. They have a cherry pitter, an avocado slicer. I'm not knocking any of these things, but avocado slicer, 4 different sizes of spatulas, this, or that, and the other. And what that does is it means you're become accustomed to be reliant on the perfect thing at the perfect moment. When you don't have the perfect thing at the perfect moment, you have to be creative. Yeah. So examples of that can be as like that much into the world of minutia as like little tools and like a rubber band. Okay, you don't have a rubber band. What can you use instead of a rubber band? We can get into that level of detail, but the point is always the same. When you have less, you have to be more creative. I also like to think about creativity and minimalism in terms of actually creating a space for mess. A lot of people who are creative have difficulty managing an organized home. Just because of and when I say creative, I mean in terms of like artistic creative people who are using different mediums, that can be very difficult for them just because of the way their mind works. Or even for folks who aren't in that zone professionally or hobbyists in that way, but even if you want to like sit down at a table and do some like origami or something, or draw on a notepad. Well, if you can't find that notepad to draw in, and you can't find, and the colored pencils are somewhere else, that's a problem. But looking beyond that, when you have a clear space, you have a canvas. And when you have a canvas, the creativity that you've been holding inside has a really beautiful space to exist. And yeah, then you'll hopefully clear it up afterwards and put stuff away. But I really think about minimalism as a doorway to create a space for mess, a space to play around. You don't feel comfortable doing that when your entire space is full of stuff and it's disorganized. You don't have that canvas. So there are so many different ways that minimalism and creativity combined. But again, I really love your examples because they show the degree to which those two things can really coexist and help each other grow.
Thank you. And I like your example of the creating space for your hobbies or your activities. And I believe it was on your website. You said something, I don't remember the exact quote, but it was something about we create efficiency and simplicity in your life, so then you can explore your hobbies or the things yet to discover. The yet to discover part, I think, is sometimes people don't realize, like, the hobbies you have now or the non-existent hobbies, you wish you're gonna, hopefully, we're always evolving, and throughout our life we'll create space for new and interesting hobbies and practices.
Right.
So,
exactly.
I don't know.
No, I really like. Yeah, no, I think that's it's so true, and it kind of speaks to the lifestyle aspect of all of this. And the more you remove, there's sort of like an ebb and flow, as we've talked about before. You start removing things, you get really excited. You're like, oh, this is so great. I feel so great. I'm getting rid of this. And then I just sold this and made some money. And I gave these things to charity and I feel really great. Da, da, da. And then you start to like look around and you don't have as much stuff around you. And your calendar is a little bit more bare. And you start to go like this and you're like, wait. I was feeling so good. And now I have some emptiness. And that doesn't feel great. And that's, of course, where yoga and mindfulness comes in, because it helps you sit with it in a structured way that gives you a little bit of comfort and safety. And then you start to say, oh, I have space. I get to fit. This isn't emptiness statically. This is like empty so you can fill it with something. And then it gets really, really good. That's kind of where the magic happens. And you get to discover new things.
I love the way you put it. There's a lot of psychology in this, all of this minimalism stuff. I didn't realize. I mean, it makes sense there would be, but it's really it really opens my mind to. I mean, it is, you're changing a life one life at a time.
Exactly, and I'm glad you mentioned that too, because you could approach minimalism from the perspective of pure practicality. Like, I want to get rid of a lot of stuff. I don't need this many shirts. Let me get rid of a bunch of my books. I'm just going to get an e-reader. I haven't used this in years. And you could just do that. And you know what? Your life will be better because of it. I wholeheartedly think that if you had 100,000 items and then you go down to 1,000, better, 100% in many respects. But the psychology piece that we're talking about here is how you can take a sort of like functional improvement in one sort of silo and broaden it to all elements of your life. So thank you for mentioning the psychology part, because again, sometimes I forget that that's an unexpected benefit of minimalism, peace and good psychology.
Yeah. So you keep touching on this a little bit each time you answer a question, which I love, but what advice, what would you say to people who might be on the fence and may not think minimalism is for them, or in a nutshell, like what would you say to people who just are in the dark?
Yeah, I think there are a few different approaches, but I think they all kind of come back to one thing, which is put your toe in the water. What's one thing that bothers you? And then just focus on that. Because I know that for some folks, they don't actually care that much about organizing. Maybe they haven't heard of minimalism, but they have too much clothes in their closet and they know it and it bothers them and they want to do something about it. Like, that's a pretty consistent issue. Or like there's clothes all over their bedroom or whatever. So clothes. Just try to do this with clothes. See how that goes. Pay a lot of attention to it, but just pick one thing. You could just pick your wallet. You could just pick your refrigerator. To kind of do an investigation, pretend you're a scientist, like investigate one piece of your life
Yeah.
And if you investigate it close enough and you see it through, something will come out of that. You'll learn something. And so if somebody is on the fence, I really encourage them not to think about becoming a minimalist, which we've already discussed doesn't have some definite definition. Don't forget about that. How can you make your life simpler? How can you downsize? Or if you choose to, maybe you're somebody who loves stuff and you're fine with everything else. Maybe you're kind of organized and you're like, well, I don't really have to pursue minimalism. What's that going to do? Well, if you are somebody who cares about the environment, it might actually be easier for you to look at sustainability through the minimalist lens, because you've lately been sort of overwhelmed by all the choices. Like, is this product more green? Is it better to, ride the bus, or to take the train? Or should I, what if I took a flight? A lot of questions around what is the most environmentally sensitive option are complicated. And I could say that as somebody who's been in that industry for a very long time, there aren't always easy, clear answers. Well, with minimalism, you're kind of addressing a lot of things at the same time. So you could take an approach of being a minimalist for the sake of sustainability and focus on things like zero waste. So there's so many different approaches. Just find that little thread that seems interesting to you.
I think that's great advice. Very inspiring. What are you personally curious about right now? It could be in your work, it could be in your life.
Oh, I feel like I'm always curious about so many things, which is why I like to try to put so much space in my life. My current curiosity is actually around going deeper into the things that I'm interested in, because I am such a curious person and I love learning so much. It's easy for me to say, oh, that's a new idea. Oh, I didn't even think about that. Let me start learning about that subject matter. And I think I'm at a point in my life where I've noticed some things I have been interested in for so long that I'm not practicing as much. Like I used to do more. I mean, music's obviously on my mind. I used to write music more. I haven't done that as much lately. I used to do more writing. I haven't done that as much lately. I ride a bike. I want to do more of that so I can get better at riding a bike. So anything that's in my life right now, including yoga, I want to find a deeper path into it. And yes, so basically my interest is not something new, it's something deeper.
I like that. What, how, and you mentioned the bike riding and the yoga, how do you reset personally? Like on a regular day, you get done with work, what does your reset look like?
For me, it's a lot of tuning out. Because I have a very active mind, constant ruminations that I try to work on. Occasionally, I do feel that I have excess energy. So a run, a bike ride, something physical will feel really good to me. But normally, I need really by the end of the day, I might be looking at something that just feels like nothing. So maybe there's some random thing I wanted to look up on the internet, or I read a chapter in a book. Cooking is a very, very fruitful reset for me. So, or even preparing food, I might not, I might be hard boiling eggs for the next day or, something like that. I do find that to be really useful. I need time where I'm not actively focused on something and where I don't feel like I have something to do next on my to-do list. So for me, a reset really, there's so many different things that can fill that role, but that's the type of reset I need. I can't, for me to sit down and meditate at the end of the day would be difficult. I have to do that at the beginning. At the end of the day, I have to be in a sort of like non-focused state.
Yeah, a chill. Yeah. Coming down.
Yeah.
what are 3 things about you people may not know and might be surprised to learn?
Well, judging by the surprised looks on people's faces when I've told my friends these things, I mentioned music before. Not only have I put out an album, it was a trip hop album, I actually rap too. So I have a hip hop EP that I had put out a few years ago. I want to return to that style of music, but I think most people who meet me are a little surprised that I can rap.
That's awesome.
The other one, just because this is sort of like a random thing that not a lot of people do, until the start of COVID, I've been a figure model. So I've been doing that for about 5 years. And basically it just entails posing for art classes, usually drawing or painting. Sometimes they're clothes, sometimes they're not. But really it's been a wonderful experience actually to use my yoga practice, because being in a pose for a long period of time, or during gesture studies when you're only in the pose for a short period of time, you're finding creative ways to move your body so everyone in the room has an interesting angle and can really take advantage of the 3D nature of this exercise that they're doing. And then having the ability to be still the entire time, not fidget. So it's a really interesting meditative experience for me. And as someone who really does enjoy the arts, being able to be a part of that process, even if only as a muse, is really exciting. But also, yeah, that people are generally surprised to hear that. And I think the other thing, just because I do, again, do yoga, I'm very calm and all these things, not really known as an adrenaline junkie, I have gone skydiving before.
Oh, wow.
That usually surprises people that I took that plunge.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
All of it. Rapping, figure modeling, skydiving. I love that. That's, yeah, I never would have known that. You're bold. I like that.
Thank you.
So where can we find you?
Well, I am located on the internet. I have a Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel now. I just launched my YouTube channel. There are a lot of great videos there that go into more depth about some of the things we've talked about. All 3 of those platforms, my tag or whatever you're supposed to call it, is why less equals more. So my business name is Less Equals More, but I like to introduce people to why less equals more, because that's really what this is about. It's not me coming in and organizing for somebody. It's helping people understand the why behind it. So you can follow me at Why Less Equals More. My website is also whylessequalsmore.com, and I really encourage everyone to go there because you can sign up for my newsletter. I have a lot of content that goes out through that. But most importantly, you could get my free ebook on my steps to downsizing. So if any of this conversation seemed interesting to you, I break it down in some basic steps. That way, if you do want to just kind of poke around and see if maybe minimalism might have something for you, that's a really, really easy way to get started, and it's free.
Cool. Thank you. What about Words for Wednesday? Did you want to share?
Oh, yes. I also have a podcast. Mine does not require as much work as yours because it is only 5 minutes or less. It's released every Wednesday, and I explore the topics of mindfulness, philosophy, creativity. I certainly touch on minimalism as well. But one of the sort of like background ideas is that when you have a minimalist lifestyle, when your life is that simple, you can spend time ruminating about creativity and philosophy and mindfulness, that those are really pieces of the lifestyle that you're creating. And you can give yourself room for that. It's also done on Wednesdays on purpose. I mean, we all have these grand ideas. Hopefully people are listening to this podcast thinking, oh, wow, I'm totally going to get into yoga and minimalism. It's wonderful. And then by Wednesday morning, all of that's out the window. So it really is meant to be a time to reset, recenter, refresh, as a sort of midweek pick-me-up. So Words for Wednesday, you can also find that on my website.
Awesome. And they're wise words, and I appreciate everything you do, and all your info will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Dara, for coming on the show. I enjoyed.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all that you do to bring yoga to a wider community. And I think that yoga has so many answers and that are beyond some yoga poses. And I really appreciate that you're bringing that to light.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode about yoga and minimalism with the wonderful Dara Zycherman. All of her links are in the show notes, so you're just one click away from connecting with her, and may I recommend that you do. She has so much knowledge to share. If you want us to keep going, hit that subscribe button. If you liked what you heard, please share the show with your friends, and please consider joining our Yoga and Podcast Patreon. There are great member perks such as access to 3 weekly live yin yoga classes with me and my kitty cats. You also get monthly access to the Sensitive Soul Secret Club. Plus, we send you podcast stickers and a love note when you sign up. You can find out that info also in the show notes. If you would like to help the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. We will read the review and thank you on the next show. To connect with us, our email is yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out YOGAAND podcast@gmail.com. Please follow us on Instagram. Our handle is also Yoga and Podcast. The theme song is by Ali Holder. Sound engineering, Foley art, and mixing by Bentley the Cat. Guest booking, PR, and social media by Chloe the Kitty. Remember, this podcast is for absolutely everyone. If you are a human living on planet Earth, you will benefit from listening to Yoga and Podcast. See you next week.